Dean, thank you so much for joining us here at the sessions. This is exciting to have you here with the amazing amount of talent that you have performed with. I've known you as a player for many, many years. When I started to read about who I didn't know you had played with, it further blew me away, all that you have done and continue to do. So thank you so much for coming by.
Oh, my pleasure.
Where do you think, Dean, this all started? When you were younger, how did music enter your life?
Well, you know, my mom was a big country music fan. I grew up in Fort Worth, Texas, and she would take me and Dad every Friday to a big theater show, and all the current country acts would come through. And of course, there was no tracks to play to back then. Every band had their players, and I just wanted to do that. And I just kept bugging her until she took me to the music store and got me some, you know, wink, wink, he wants to take lessons. And I said, okay, well, we'll just rent an instrument, you know, this will all blow over, but it didn't. And I ended up playing, eventually, in about a year, I played on that show.
Really?
On that weekly show, yeah. My guitar teacher came and accompanied me. I played a little steel guitar. They would only teach me because my hands were too small for real guitar.
Interesting. Why guitar?
I don't know. That's what I saw was country music, and we're talking 1954, maybe 1953 or 54. So, electric guitar, acoustic guitar.
That was it.
It was driven by that, and they had steel guitar too.
Interesting. So you started taking lessons.
I started taking
local teacher in the area.
Yep, the teacher that worked at the music store, Dale Woodward. And he taught me, and taught me private rather than he usually had classes, but since I was much younger than everybody else in the classes, he taught me privately. And you know, I learned my 2 or 3 songs and had a great time.
Did he taught you songs? Did you learn any theory? Was he giving you changes?
Well, there was a tabulature kind of thing where each fret, he put a piece of tape there, fret 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, and wrote that in pen. And so that's the frets, and the tabulature was in terms of frets and which strings on which frets. And
an easy way to teach. That's brilliant.
Yeah. So it was an interesting way. It's all a parallel chord, of course, but you do get an idea, oh, 1 chord, 4 chord, 5 chord, oh yeah, and 2 chord, oh. So kind of first off the bat, you get a kind of a nice backbone of playing by ear, you know, what all those chords sound like and where they are.
What a clean way to learn.
Yeah,
very interesting.
Yeah.
Who were you listening to at that time?
Well, let's see. Who was coming through was probably Webb Pierce and Hank Williams and, you know, the country acts of the mid-'50s.
Right.
So Leon McAuliffe was Bob Wills was the local country band, and he was the steel player in that band. So I knew his name. Take it away, Leon. Great fun, but I was a little too conspicuous as a little kid that could play music, so I retired when I was 6. Dropped out of it altogether. Did not want the special attention. School was starting, 1st grade.
And then what happened after that? How to come back?
You know, I still had a guitar around, and me and some neighbor kids would fool around from time to time, just on the steel guitar. Wasn't much to do on a steel guitar. In 50s music, Elvis was coming up, Chuck Berry, so forth. I decided I wanted to play regular guitar again when Link Ray was doing instrumentals, Dwayne Eddy. And I saw, I guess, Ricky Nelson doing, you know, I just wanted to play chords to sing with. So I went back to the same teacher, and they rented me a guitar. And he said, okay, I'll teach you 3 chords at the end of the month. But first, here's, and Mel Bay Publishing.
The Mel Bay books of guitar.
Yeah, very beginner's thing with a few folk tunes. It was written out in music, and 2-string polka, just used 2 strings. He said, learn these. He tricked me into becoming a lead player by not teaching me chords until a month of lead playing. Then he taught me 3 chords, a 1, 4, and 5, probably E, A, and B. And then I had to wait another month to learn 3 more chords. And so he drug me through more lessons. And anyway, that happened until I learned all the chords and all the keys. And meanwhile, I kind of figured out what Chuck Berry was doing. He was playing off that F position up the neck.
Yeah.
And that's what all the rock and roll guys were doing. I got it, and I quit lessons.
So were you listening to music on recordings at all at that point? Were you trying to?
Yeah, some recordings, transistor radios were brand new.
Right, at that time, yeah, sure.
I had a little radio that I would fall asleep listening to whatever's on the radio.
It's amazing how much different music was on the radio at that time.
Well, it was very good variety.
Yeah.
Excellent variety of music. Because, we're coming out of the Patti Page era.
Right.
And the Hank Williams era, when everything was sophisticated and very raw. The country stuff was more raw and more individual players. You could hear what was happening. Right. And then Elvis came along and sort of blew it all apart. And then Chuck Berry sneaked in. No one knew he was black at first, and so we got into R&B music through that. And it became, music just started expanding.
Yeah.
And everybody that learned, I got in a group, and we would get together every week at a different member's house with their parents, and we learned all of the surf tunes, all of the Duane Eddy tunes, all the instrumentals that came along, and there was a healthy instrumental market.
At that time,
You could have a hit with an instrumental, and so we knew all those songs. So it was like taking lessons from all of the prominent players, and as the music developed, then you kind of developed with it. And then the Beatles came along, that same group decided to learn to sing, and so we learned all of the Beatles, the Rolling Stones, Byrds. Great.
Boy, at that time the 60s was exploding.
Yeah.
So many bands at that time.
So meanwhile, I'm in high school, first year of high school. The band director just starts a jazz band, and they're playing a knockoff version of Peter Gunn. And they're playing, and I'm listening as an audience member and thinking, that needs a guitar. I know Peter Gunn, and that's a low guitar.
Yeah.
So I went to the guy and said, you kind of need a guitar in your band. And he said, oh, okay, well, I'll let you sit in a few times and see if it works. And it worked out great. And so I became a member of a jazz band. So that's how I got into a different realm of music altogether.
Playing jazz. So in the school, the school music program.
The school music program
was helpful.
Very, very helpful. Extremely.
We have a challenge now because school music programs are being pulled out dramatically.
It is terrible. I tell you, my first day in that band, and I'm sitting here sort of in the back by the rhythm section, but here it's trumpets, trombones, saxes, and we're playing a chart. These are all stock charts, but West Side Story, and Embraceable You, and being in the middle of these harmonies, it was just fantastic. And I can't imagine coming into that music remotely without having experienced it and being able to do as well as I did by having that little program going already. And that made me want to learn horns, and so I learned sax and clarinet, and ended up playing lead alto in the high school band and doing a bunch of arrangements because it was a competitive, everybody had a band.
Right.
And so there were contests, and we would go and we'd compete band against band. They were all playing these stock arrangements, which were great. I mean, but a couple of the bands were shining because they had guys within the bands, or they had professional arrangers that were coming up with new stuff. And I was listening to the Woody Herman stuff. Woody Herman, 1962, is that it? With Sister Sadie and all of that stuff on there. And After You've Gone, the Bill Holman stuff.
Deep music.
So I wanted to be the Bill Holman of the band and write charts. So I kind of learned to read and write at the same time, which is really great.
How did sax come in? What inspired you for sax to play, to pick up that instrument?
They say after the first year, the band director said, this is a band program. You really need to be in the concert band if you want to stay in the program, because it is a separate thing from band class, but that's the deal.
Right.
So that first summer, I learned clarinet and tried out for the band, because there were so many clarinets in the band. I figured somebody foolishly told me that was an easy instrument to learn to get into the band. They didn't tell me the lower register was in a different key than the upper register. Great, thanks. While I'm learning to read, this is what I strapped with, and it was no big burden because I learned on it and had a good teacher back at the same music store. I went back and took clarinet lessons.
Well, you were a good customer there.
I was a good customer, a repeat customer. And I loved at that time I knew music. I could already play what I hear on a guitar. Just from learning all these songs, I could think of something or hear something and find it and play it. So I could already play by ear. Learning a second instrument is kind of fun because you already know the fundamentals of music. You can dive into that second instrument at a little higher level.
Yeah.
You know, the technicality, making the sound, that's you have to learn.
Yeah.
But the music of it, you're sort of ahead of the game, and it's fun. It's exhilarating to jump in at a slightly higher level in a brand new instrument.
Have you continued with sax?
Yeah, I still have all my saxophones.
Really?
Yeah, I went to college and played sax. I played both. North Texas State has got a great jazz program,
Absolutely.
and that's where I went to college. And I was in one band on guitar and another band on sax. I worked my way up on saxes until I ended up playing lead alto in that band,
Wow.
the 1 O'Clock band there.
Yeah.
Those systems. The nice thing about North Texas is that they do teach classes, and I did learn in theory class especially because my sax teacher at North Texas. I went majoring in music, not thinking that music is a career. I had not yet decided at all that music was any way that you could possibly make a living in the real world. So I went to college as a math major. Meanwhile, I'd learned about studio work. And I had a reel-to-reel tape recorder, and I would go buy tape at a place that was also the local recording studio, and they did local jingles. And I heard the door was open one day, huge playback speakers. Best hi-fi, better than any hi-fi system you could have, because it was a professional listening environment, and here was this small orchestra playing perfectly, beautifully in tune, and I thought, wow, these people came here and they did this work. That's
and
nice.
got paid for it, right?
That would be a great idea. That's a profession I didn't know existed.
So that opened up a door for you to
It
realize
opened
that
up the door as a possibility,
Right.
but I didn't, because you never know whether you're gonna, you know that the skill level has to be pretty high to be there. You never know whether you're gonna
Right.
be able to fit in until you get there in a way and do some work. But I think knowing that existed, I sort of gravitated toward getting those skills together on my way. And I had a tape recorder and I could hear myself play. I thought that's kind of an important thing to do, is to know what effect you're really having, because you don't really know when you're playing.
To hear yourself, what a great learning experience.
I mean, even now, when I come back from a vacation or something, and I'm get my first studio date of the week or something, and I go in and I hear myself back, and, oh yeah, okay, I'm pressing a little hard there, and I'm maybe playing a little ahead of the beat or something. Settle down, do it, And there's a whole, like a studio player develops, or any professional player develops a sort of, there's a horsing around mode, and then there's a bulletproof mode, where it may be at 80%.
Right.
Like you're playing up at 80%. And your 80%, that means your 100% has to be up here for your 80% to be here.
Yeah.
But you still want to play in that safe, for sure zone, and it takes some calibration to do it, and there's no better way than hearing what you just played and comparing that with what you thought you just played.
Right. Great comparison.
You can hear tuning, you can hear touch, you can hear how you blend, you can hear how your sound. As a guitar player, you have almost an infinite number of ways to go wrong as far as your sound goes. So getting the right sound that blends in with just less bass than the bass, enough treble to mix in nicely without being the most treble thing in the track. They'll never mix you up.
Yeah.
Where you can hear your part. If you make those adjustments.
Ear training too. That's really a way to heighten that skill.
Yeah, it is.
So at what point did you go now into the professional?
So I'm here. I've got a year behind me majoring in math. My sax teacher had seen me at some of these stage band contests back in high school and knew that I could do arrangements, and he already knew sort of who I was musically. He said, just major in music, because I was complaining that I didn't really have enough time to practice because physics class, math,
Deep,
You know,
yeah.
Plus, I was still working in the same group. We were doing fraternity gigs by now on the weekends, Friday night and Saturday night. So I was doing that an hour away in Fort Worth or Dallas, or 4 hours away in Houston. We would do these weekend gigs, and then I'd come back and try to get back on, do homework and do math and be in 2 lab bands. So it became a thing. So he suggested I just go ahead and throw all of my eggs into that basket of being a professional musician. And so I made a little deal with myself, because I decided that I would, because there's a certain amount of time you have to spend every day.
Right.
At that point, I thought, well, what a relief it would be to think that the time I'm putting in on my music is actually building something that is of value, rather than playing hooky from physics class. And I became willing to, I decided that it would be a better time for me to go with my strongest suit in music, even if it were at a lower level and I didn't become a studio musician, even if it were just a local musician in clubs. I thought, you know what? I think that life would be okay. I'm okay with the less money. I want to go into it. And it was a huge relief to have made that decision, because then there was a focus. And guess what? Then there's a little panic sets in too, and it's like, well, how good is it? At that time I was a sax player. How good is your flute playing, your flute sound? How good is your tuning? How good is your sight reading? Maybe get yourself on a little treadmill to get your skills up to a higher level too. And it's the pressure that comes from that decision is also productive.
But it's productive because it motivated you, which is you raised your game even more.
Yeah.
So now you're out of college and you're now pursuing music. Did you stay in Texas, or did you?
Yeah, I stayed in Texas. Started doing local commercials. Now, Dallas was fairly vibrant studio scene, and all the regional commercials generally were in Chicago or Dallas for the Midwest. So there were good players, great big bands, great rhythm sections, but no real vacancies until rock and roll came along. The day that I walked into an elevator, and the elevator music was not, but it was, I thought, I'm in. Things are switching. Things are changing, and there's going to be room for me in a place there had not been room for me before.
What a great observation. That's interesting. And that's really what happened.
That is really what happened.
Yeah.
And so, they were doing commercials that were wanted to be in the same territory as a Hendrix record or a Beatle record or James Taylor record.
Right.
I'm the guy. The older guys are not. They could kind of do it, but I could be in there too, and between the two of us, we could get something going. So I became a studio player gradually in Dallas.
And the studio scene was vibrant there, so you're working?
It had been more vibrant. They invented the station break ID, the singing call letters with the big band,
Right.
WHYNO or whatever
the
thing is that George Carlin used to sing, who, by the way, was a local DJ in KXOL. I used to listen to him on my little transistor radio.
Oh, great. What a brilliant mind he was.
Brilliant. Yeah. But those station break IDs, there were like 2 big bands doing dates all around the 3 or 4 studios in Dallas every day. That fell through when album rock started coming along. That was no longer hip. That was like old school.
Yeah.
And so these guys, these studio players that I got to know, the older guys, said, we moved our families here from all over the country to be part of the studio scene, and now it's sort of fallen apart. If you want to be in studios, you should probably go to LA or Nashville or New York, because that is going to be a place that is going to have your career is going to be available there, or a career.
More opportunity.
More opportunity there.
Yeah.
So I decided upon LA because I like variety. I come up through country music, but I learned all the rock and roll R&B tunes, but then I learned jazz in the school. And so that I love variety. I love all those musics. I love good versions of all those musics.
Yeah.
dislike all bad versions and all the. L.A. is what I chose because it seemed like there was more variety. In New York, I couldn't figure out how to get along with a guitar rig in the town.
It's not easy.
Not easy,
Not
I'm
easy
sure.
at all. Yeah, not easy at
A
all.
lot of borrowed equipment and studio resident equipment, stuff like that.
So you had the courage to make the move, which in its first step really it was a big move, right?
It's a big move, yeah.
Yeah. And you came out here. Did you know anybody out here?
I was told I should have 6 months living expenses saved. And I was making way more than my rent in Dallas, and so I started saving, for a year or two. And I thought what I thought was 6 months living expenses saved up. That's 6 months in Denton, Texas. That's not 6 months in Los Angeles.
About a week in LA,
I hadn't
right?
really checked, yeah. So, but anyway, I saved up some money. They said also have 2, for sure, jobs there. So I knew 2 players that were established, and I thought, well, that's my 2 real jobs, because I was getting encouragement from one. He thought I could cut it. And the studios, Larry Mahoberak, keyboard player. Another was Ron Tutt, the drummer. And they had both been in the Dallas scene, and I'd met them there, and then they moved to L.A. Well, neither of those actually turned out to be any jobs, but the job that brought me to L.A. is that I joined the Sonny and Cher. They started doing live shows, the Supper Club. This is after their big, the hippie era of Sonny and Cher with the beaver coats and bell bottoms.
So was this
past the bell bottoms? This was Cher is in an evening gown, Sonny's in a tuxedo.
And was this during the TV show at all?
No. This was doing just supper clubs, the Fairmont hotels, but Vegas. Every place had a big band, and they needed a 4-piece rhythm section. I talked them into hiring. I played with them on one show in Dallas and talked them into hiring my band, which was the rhythm section of the 1 o'clock North Texas, because we all wanted to move to LA.
Right.
So that's a great way to move a place, because you have the income of gigs. It's not a continual thing. They weren't on the road week after week after week. It was block, then not, then block, then not. So there was time for you to get some thing going in town.
And you can meet people, so the network, so you had some...
And you have the income that doesn't depend on where you live.
Absolutely. Nice.
So it turned out to be a good thing. Plus, now Sonny Bono thought we were a great rhythm section. They got an offer for these 6 summer TV shows while we were their rhythm section, and he insisted on getting us auditions for the TV show band. Now that was sort of unheard of, because that's a whole hour's worth of music that has to be done in a 3-hour session.
Right.
And all the musicians are there, and what you get is what you get. The vocals were live, but the music was pre-recorded, so these were intense sessions with a big band size group. But I did have reading experience from the studios and from North Texas.
And who was arranging all this stuff?
Jimmy Dale.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think he had done the Andy Williams show maybe before I came into town, but it turned out to be a great proving ground to prove that I could do that kind of work, which was current, because it was all the most current songs. It was covers of the pop tunes of the day, and traditional tunes too, and ragtime, banjo kind of stuff, all sorts of stuff.
So it was everything thrown at you.
Yeah, exactly. So it turned out to be a great series of accidents that gave me a foothold in the studio scene in LA.
Well, you say a great series of accidents, but you were really well prepared for what was being thrown in front of you. That's an important part of it.
That's true. Yeah. And I saw, for instance, back in Texas, Glenn Campbell came out. He had been a studio player, and he did this song, Gentle on My Mind. And it became a big record. I saw him on Johnny Carson, and he had, grabbed the guitar from behind the couch casually. And played that finger-picking part that is the motor for that, and sang live right at the couch. And I thought, oh, great, well, now I need to learn to do that. So I got my acoustic. I just gotten an acoustic because I knew I wanted to be a studio player, and I had to have one. And I just played that very slowly with a metronome. No mistakes. Slow enough that you didn't make mistakes. My sax teacher, the guy that recommended I major in music, taught me a way to learn. We were learning all of these French saxophone pieces. That's where most of the literature for legit sax was. And so you get these big arpeggios that were, it wasn't a minor chord exactly, it wasn't a diminished chord exactly, it was like, just like maybe 11 notes of the scale were in this thing. And so to learn that, how do you learn that? He says, you play it 10 times perfectly, slowly, play it 10 times perfectly, medium tempo, 10 times perfectly at the fast tempo, and then you have it, it's yours. And if you goof, you go back to number one again at that tempo. So I kind of incorporated that with the finger picking thing. By the time I got to LA, you're right, I was able to do that.
Yeah.
And I learned to do capoing, to give yourself some open strings, but not transpose the music, just keep the music in E flat if it's in E flat.
Nice.
And knowing that if I'm making the D chord shape up here, well, it's still the same dots, you know.
Yeah.
Think of it in terms of the grid of the guitar, and you just have the convenience of open strings rather than thinking of it as a D chord you're making an E flat chord. So that was nice stuff too, and you don't just get that quickly, it's a gradual thing, and you kind of develop it as you need it. Although I have to say, when I got to LA and heard, sitting next to Larry Carlton, who was already an established player, to hear what he could do was way enlightening, because he was the first really great guitar player, I suppose, that I'd set aside for any length of time. He started recommending me for second guitar slots on sessions and stuff.
How great is that?
And just to know what was possible and what he was thinking of, and our dialogue about what we were listening to, and how the guy on the record did. How do you think he do this? You think he retuned that string, or what about this lick? You know, listen to this lick and how it fits here. And we'd each try to do, you know, a George Harrison thing on one tune or something like that, where it's signature lick that defines the song that didn't exist. The writer didn't write it, the arranger didn't arrange it. You come up with it because the song needs it to make it the current thing. The way it happened in production then is that the people in production were slightly behind the actual market, because no one knew what was going to be a hit. So each new thing became a hit, and we'd all kind of get into it and learn it. And then we get to the session, and the producers and the arrangers wouldn't necessarily know how a guitar, what's easy or what's hard on a guitar. They know it needed that, but they didn't know exactly how to get there. And so that having experienced players that did a lot of that figuring out on their own was a very valuable thing.
Well, that session attitude and mentality must have been pretty intense, because those are very important things to invent and create at the moment.
Yeah.
In that session.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
Because it didn't exist before.
Absolutely.
It's now the definitive version of the song. It's a new song. No one ever heard the song.
Fantastic.
Which, by the way, makes the studio profession just a dream profession for me, who likes to do music for fun. Yeah. Because here you are in a place, you know you're going to hear it on the best sound system you've ever heard. You're with the best players in the world, and it's all brand new material that no one's ever heard before, because it was just written. This is the first use of it, often, you know.
Absolutely.
I mean, there are times where you do cover tunes or cover versions of tunes, but they want those to be fresh too, right? You don't want it to be just like what's already there. It needs to, so invention is part of the rhythm section part.
And then look at that spontaneous injection of an idea.
Yeah.
Now,
and all the other players are hearing it.
Yeah.
And arranging around it, because the rhythm section in session playing is arranging. It's communal arranging.
Right.
And so you get, often, I know in the 70s, when I was breaking in LA, Michael Mardian would be on the session. Michael Mardian, Jim Gordon, Larry Carlton, me. Well, you know, practically everybody in the rhythm section could write an arrangement. And we're doing that. They were making you take suggestions from the producer, and the producer may actually want have everything completely figured out what
Right.
you want to play.
Right,
Get me
right.
all the way from that to, well, I don't know, let me play it, and you make a chord sheet if you need to. All the way from one end to the other. It's an invention and it's an arrangement that has to happen. And the producer is listening in there, he's protecting the listener.
Absolutely.
Like, if it's uninteresting, if the second verse has nothing to offer that the first verse didn't, he needs to at least ask for something different,
Right.
if not suggest something different. And as you're playing a solo or coming up with a part that you think might be the perfect part for this little part of the song, if the producer doesn't like it, I learned this in my first 2 weeks. Well, I could use that on some other song, or I can invent. I mean, it's really, there's about 100 good ideas for that spot.
And that goes into your vault.
And all I have to do is come up with one that the producer likes also.
Yeah.
So it's all, and if he asks me to do something I don't like, I modify it. I keep coming up with things that would be okay with me. And it's a collaboration. So the musical knowledge is an important part, but also the ability to cooperate is a big part too.
Boy, to be at that point, the immediacy of it is really what that is, and then giving them many options for them to choose from.
Yeah,
is really what that.
but
what
not
happens.
too many.
Yeah.
Once they've decided, I mean, they have a whole album to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And a limited budget,
Yeah,
so you don't drag things down by offering infinite options. Once the option is there, you might modify it as you go, as
Right.
do take after take after take, come up with a better way. If they'll let you know if it goes astray.
Yeah, if it doesn't work for them.
Right, but generally it's a collaborative arrangement.
Wow, so you're doing all these different sessions and you're working the business side of it. How do you organize yourself to book the sessions, show up on time, find time to practice? How have you organized yourself in that way?
Yeah, well, that's it does. I try to get enough sleep
Smart.
so that I'm
Fresh.
sharp and fresh and relaxed. Also, when I'm late to a recording session, that's what I call the wrong kind of adrenaline.
Yeah.
That's bad, stressful adrenaline, and that stays with you a while. I'd rather get there a little early than be stressed out at every driver that doesn't make the turn that I expected him to drive.
Well said.
Right?
Well said.
Yeah, you get there in enough time to make sure your stuff is good and you're settled and you're ready to go. So that's one discipline. You can't do a gig that you don't show up for.
Right.
And that's kind of rule number one. And contractors they'll catch on pretty quick if you're not showing up on time. So you got to do that because you're part of a big group, and time is money. Everybody's getting paid. Everybody else also is getting paid by the hour, including the studio. So you have respect for that. Practicing is interesting. When I first started in the 70s in LA, there was so much work. I mean, there was a huge amount of work. Every TV show had a 5 to 12 piece group. Sessions were in 3-hour increments, an hour in between, so you could get from a morning session to an afternoon session. Then most record dates were at night, and then you do record dates at night. So 3 sessions a day, or maybe 4 if you fit in a jingle.
Interesting. In between that,
in
right?
In between, yeah, you got to do a commercial in there, and the little 1 hour between, during supper while other people are eating supper. And on weekends too, it was a lot of playing, and I actually stressed my hand at one point and had to give myself a little bit of space and get my guitars set up better and learn to play in a straight line here instead of here, and a few things to make it palatable for me to play long hours. But I would find myself, I'm sitting next to Louis Shelton, Larry Carlton, and Tommy Tedesco. And on the weekends, I wanted to practice because there was stuff that I really wanted to get comfortable that I'd never thought of, approaches to the guitar. So, it was a real challenge not to wear out my chops just by going in there and trying to learn everything and practice every spare minute.
Well, it sounded like your enthusiasm to want to learn maintain that level of excitement for music.
Well, that's true. When I was arranging back in the high school and college days, there was the book by Russ Garcia called The Professional Arranger Composer. And he said, wherever you are, wherever you're listening to music incidentally, just analyze what that is. Oh, that's a minor chord. Oh, it's got a minor sixth, and the sixth moves to a seventh. And just use the time. You've got an opportunity there. You've got well-crafted music to listen to. Analyze it. So I kind of took that when I decided to become a studio player also. Analyze that. If you can't figure it out, maybe at home you'll remember to bring that up and see how that was done. So yeah, that's it's exhilarating to progress, and it's more fun to play when your chops are good. So when you figure all that out, that you get yourself together.
Well, you start to really feel better at that point.
Yeah.
And that's amazing. Boy, you went on to play with some of the greatest names in the music industry and continue to do that. In closing, if we think about it now, we've got these students that are listening, and they're young musicians that are, excited about the music industry, and they want to have some level of advice that you can share with them to give them hope for success in the music industry. What would you tell them?
I noticed when I got to Los Angeles that in the real professional environment, there's a positivity. If there's one player that's not making it, or if one chart is horrible, they figure out ways to fix it. How can we fix it? How can we give this player a simpler part? What is he doing that would work?
Right.
Kind of thing. And there's nobody putting him down. There's nobody ridiculing anybody else. No one cares why it's bad. Everyone wants it to be good, because you want to be on success. You want to be on that train. Word gets out, the session went well, one session leads to another. And also I'd say in the analytical part, like I'm saying, listen to everything. Listen to every player too. I've learned something from every guitar player I've ever heard, because everyone has an individual approach. And that was a nice area. What made that work? More space between the notes, maybe? Or, less accent than you would expect, but it's still an accent drawing you into it.
Yeah.
His level is down right with the drums, so that, what is it about this experience that's working? So, all of that stuff. As far as getting jobs and stuff, that's hard to say, because like I say, in the 70s, it was so much. There was in a hardworking town like New York and LA. There was so much work that grid was already there. It's just a matter of you finding a spot in it. These days, I would say, anytime you get a chance to play on a real project, like if it's a demo, a friend is writing a thing and he's using sampled guitars, for instance, on his laptop, offer to do guitar parts for him. And then you're going to learn from what you hear about you doing. You're going to learn that you play ahead of the beat or behind the beat, or that when it gets loud, you want to get fast. You learn that stuff right away.
That real sense of control.
Yeah. So just jump in there and do it. And guess what? If that record takes off, or if it becomes a record, he's probably going to want you to do the real thing if he has any control over it. And people will ask down the line, who was that guitar player? Get in the mix.
That sounds like it's fantastic advice.
Yeah.
And if they can at least follow a part of what you're saying, there is success ahead of them for sure.
Yeah.
Boy, Dean, thank you so much. On behalf of the Sessions, you are an absolutely seasoned pro, man. Thank you so much for all that you do and are continuing to do. Keep it going. We need you.
Thanks. I'm
Thank
glad
you
to
so
be
much.
there.
All right.